Welcome to the Contrarians and to yet another Dark Horse album episode. Tonight we are looking at the Van Halen album, A Different Kind of Truth. This was the last album with David Lee Roth, Wolfie's on bass, no Michael Anthony, kids. Let's get started. The panel's here and we are ready to rock. The Contrarians and to yet another Dark Horse album episode. Tonight's victim is A Different Kind of Truth from Van Halen, released in Tim Derling with God and Joe. Released in 2012. This album has no Michael Anthony on it, but David Lee Roth's back. Wolfie's playing bass. This is like the first studio album since Van Halen 3, and that came out what was it, 1998? So it's been a while. So we got David Lee Roth back. And this original project started out when Wolfie was going through, like, they were going to do like a B-sides record. And he was going through everything and they listened to some demos and here we go. Because a lot of this material came early in their career. So they kind of reworked it. David Lee Roth re-recorded vocals, rewrote the lyrics too. So there was a lot to it. But it was nice, refreshing. Van Halen was back. So we're going to look at this record. Not much is talked about this record anymore, but we're going to revisit it and see if it really stands up. And I think we'll just get started. And I guess I'll go start with Joe since he was here first. And then Joe, Martin, Kevin, the Parish of Rock. And we want to welcome the Parish of Rock because
thank you.
I don't think you've been on anything yet, right, Parish?
That's right. This is my first, so thank you for having me on. I've been viewing the Contrarians for a good couple of years now. Love the format, love the show. So delighted to be joining you tonight. So thank you.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
And like the Parish, you could be on these too. You could join our Patreon and you could be on these talks too. And if you don't want to do that, we do have a Ko-fi. And you can donate that way. Without any further ado, kids, let's get started. And let's start with Joe B. All right, Joe. Now, what's your thoughts on the record, general review? And then I want your rating out of 10 at the end.
It's going to be hard for me not to give this a 10 because this album literally got me through heart surgery and death. Like I flatlined in the hospital the first night after I got a valve replaced. So I find out a couple of weeks after this album is released that I need to get a valve replaced. It was something I was born with. So I have a nice scar down the middle of my chest. So I listen to this every day in the hospital and during my recovery. So it got me through. That being said, you don't listen to albums and then, I haven't listened to this in maybe a year. So I listened to it a couple times since we decided to do this episode, and also I was on a Peter Kerr's channel, and I'll tell you, it stands the test of time with me, and it stands up to all the David Lee Roth albums because it starts with Tattoo, and everybody slagged Tattoo. I guess let me start first. I think that this is a dark horse because one, Eddie dug up a bunch of old songs, but they're great songs that he had in his pocket, and Michael Anthony wasn't on this album, but if anyone wanted to know what it sounds like for Eddie Van Halen, if he would have played with Billy Sheehan, it's there with Wolfgang because he's amazing at bass. And it's totally evident during Chinatown. But Tattoo, it builds and builds and builds. So you get Tattoo, She's the Woman, You and Your Blues, Chinatown. By the way, before I went to the hospital, my youngest son said "Stay Frosty" to me. That's because we were listening to this record constantly, and I constantly listen. But I'll tell you what, Blood and Fire is a great song. But then when you get the Bullet Head until the end of the album, it's friggin' great. It's Bullet Head's awesome, as is awesome. Honey Baby Sweetie Doll, what they do with it's just so weird and cool, and back in that weird Van Halen-esque kind of fits maybe with the Fair Warning weirdness. I love it. The Trouble with Never. Out of Space is just another kick butt song. Stay Frosty is in the vein of Ice Cream Man, and it's just great. If there's anything that Dave's vocals are a little weak on this, but I still have to give it a 10. It's great. I love this album, and it's hard, for David Lee Roth albums, aside from Diver Down for me, they're all almost 10s. It's like picking your favorite kid, but I just think it's a great album, and it stands up to all the original David Lee Roth albums. I love it, and they're great songs. I think Wolfgang is amazing. Yeah, it got me through heart surgery. So I mean, it has a soft spot for me because it helped me with my recovery, and I listen to it every day in the hospital. But re-listening to it, it still stands the test of time for me. So I give it a 10 out of 10.
There you go, kids. That's the way you start out a show.
Yeah. I died, man. I flatlined. So
not laughing at the fact you died, but how do we follow that?
I'm like, it was like, yeah. I woke up saying, "Hey, I'm like Nikki Sixx," but like laying in the hospital, I'm like, I just want to fall asleep, and I thought I fell asleep. Next thing I know, everyone's yelling at me, and I guess they paddled me and they did everything, and really? I don't remember a thing. Yeah, I didn't see any white lights or anything, but this album helped me get through it, and it's still great. So
all right,
that's rating. There you
10
go.
out of 10. There you go. Thanks, Joe B. Appreciate it. Let's pop it over to Martin and see what Martin has to say.
Well, so this is a weird one for me because it feels like it's in that category with like an Iggy Pop Instinct or a Budgie Power Supply, where the band goes and does this heavy record. It's a little bit of be careful what you wish for. It is what you want. It's what we've all wanted from Van Halen for years and years and years. And when they do it, I'm happy with it. I like it, but there's still something just a little weirdly off. And Joe, I think you hit it. One thing that you mentioned there, you called Dave's vocals a little weak. And I'm wondering, it's only a little weak, right? And then the lyrics are only a little weak. The lyrics are like, they're like, so what he's done, the most important thing they've done here, and it's important because it's distracting. I think what he's done is, he's written them with his standard wisecracking today version of his life philosophy, which gets just more obscure and eccentric as time goes on. So you're constantly hearing these little bumper sticker phrases all over the place, and it's distracting you. It's pulling you away from what's going on. And then if his vocal's a little flat or a little sharp or something, or a little high in the mix, because that happens too, you're distracted by that as well. So the whole time you're going along, I'm feeling distracted by that. And I'm also feeling distracted by this narrative of having these songs where I guess 7 out of 13 sort of thing is more or less, rebuilt from the past, new parts are put in and stuff like that. So I'm constantly distracted by thinking I'm, going around as an exercise and looking for those little hokey 1974 or 1975 feeling parts, even if they're 76 or 77 parts, the parts that feel like, when we talk about Helix, the Canadian bar band version of Helix versus the hair metal version of Helix, right? That same thing. And so I'm going along, and I'm like, yeah, that part there, and that the chorus they go into here, and the break, and so I'm constantly like being just a tiny bit let down by that stuff, right? And then overall, all this adds up to, even on the fast ones, there's something about when they do these fast, heavy ones, which are really kind of smart from a guitar riff end of things. Chinatown, a Bullet Head. And then it's got the insane fast shuffle one on here, as is, I guess, is the one, right? Where it's the whole "I'm the one" thing all over again. But I find there's just this weird sort of casualness to it. Like it's like I can't take it fully seriously, even though it's so heavy, right? So I go away from it. I think I love it a lot, and then I play it and I think I'm not gonna like it, and then I find myself really liking it, and just grooving along to, like, so much great drums on here, so much great bass, so much great guitar soloing, right? Lots and lots of it, quantity and quality. that I'm kind of loving it, right? I'm really torn, right? You know, I Stay Frosty being an ice cream man thing again, and Beats Working, it feels a little 70s. She's the Woman feels a little 70s as well. So yeah, Tattoo. Blood and Fire's one I'm not too crazy about, but yeah, I agree with you, Joe. That stretch from Bullet Head through As Is and Honey Baby Sweetie Doll, The Trouble with Never, out of Space, that whole long stretch there, that up just past the halfway point, pretty amazing. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place with this one. I don't really know what to think. It sold well, right? I mean, sold pretty well. And I think people were also just sort of confused by it at the time too. And there was like mixed reviews, but mostly positive, because most people were just blown away by this thing being so heavy. So yeah, 411,000 copies, I guess, in the 10 months after. It's probably gold now, especially if you bring in Spotify numbers. So I'm gonna. I thought an 8 would be a little bit too generous, and 7.5 just feels like the right number in some weird way. So I'm going to go 7.5 on it. So it's a bit of a be careful what you wish for. Not as bad as Iggy Pop Instinct, and not as good as Budgie Power Supply.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder, you don't have Don Landy on it. You don't have Ted Templeman. It's hard to. What was the last 1984? You're jumping from 1984 clear to 2012, and things change, and I don't know. It's hard to capture what you once had and revisit it. That might be part of the problem. But I don't know. I think 7.5. I think that's totally fair for this. But I think David Lee Roth sounds pretty good. Because gentlemen, you hear him sing live, and he always sounds, well, questionable, but when he's in the studio, he seems to be able to bring it. It's just weird. I don't know, but I think he sounds okay on this. Let's jump over to Kevin T and get his thoughts on the record. Kevin?
All right. Well, thanks for having me again, guys. My history with the album isn't as dramatic as Joe's, but this was, so around this time I had quit my office job, and I was a snowboard instructor for a winter. And I had moved up in the mountains, and I had a handful of albums with me. And this one came out around that time. And it was one I listened to a lot. I loved it right away. Over the years, it kind of just sat in the background, didn't listen to it much. And then recently, in preparation for this, I listened to a lot. And I agree with Joe. This album stands up. I'll just go through quickly song by song. Tattoo. I know a lot of people have problems with this song. I never thought it was as bad as everyone says it is. I just think it shouldn't have been the lead single. It's not like anything else on the album. It's the only one with synthesizers. I do like Eddie's solo on there. Eddie's guitar playing in general on the whole album is great. I just think it probably should have been sequenced differently in the album and not the lead single. She's the Woman. Love that one. Good mid-paced stomper with some groove. Dave's goofy lyrics. I'm kind of a sucker for Dave. That seems to be make or break with a lot of people on this album, is whether you're buying Dave's shtick still after all these years. And I still love it. So, and the guitars on that song really sound fat, and that really kind of is true for the whole rest of the album. You and Your Blues, okay song. I do like Eddie's main guitar lick on that one, though. Chinatown, great fast song, and this is where you really kind of strap in for the album. Although the next song, Blood and Fire, probably is not my favorite song, probably my least favorite song on the album. It's the one that sounds the most like it could fit into the Sammy era for me, actually. It's kind of a cleaner guitar and just more poppy. But yeah, it's okay. It's just not my favorite. And then from there on out, like Joe said, put on your seatbelt. Bullet Head, that sounds like a punk version of Van Halen. Just a great song. As Is might be my favorite song on the album. Kind of harkens back to the weirdness of like Women and Children First. I was thinking Everybody Wants Some, kind of reminds me of that song. Honey Baby Sweetie Doll. I have to read that one every time I look at the song. Probably one of the strangest songs on the album. But Eddie's creativity with the guitars on that one just really shines. And that almost sounds like him doing a Tom Morello impersonation at a time, just how creative he can get with making just pure guitar sounds, but integrated into a song. Trouble with Never, again, that's not my favorite. Another okay song. I think I don't like the chorus on that one. But Dave gets a little weird at the end of the guitar solo because kind of like a Barry White impersonation, which again, like the Dave shtick at times. Out of Space, great fast-paced one that brings you right back into the album. Alex and Wolfgang as the rhythm section just sound great on that song, I think. Again, with Stay Frosty, they sound great on that one. Like everyone says, that's like the sequel to Ice Cream Man. I read somewhere where Dave said this album was like modern Van Halen having a conversation with classic Van Halen. And that's what that song reminds me of. It probably shows that the most out of all the songs. Big River, that might be my second favorite song on the album. It just sounds so huge. And I love Eddie's massive guitar solo on that one. And Beats Workin' ends the album, another one from the old days that's kind of modernized and just, I buy into it. It just sounds great. I never really had a problem with, people have the criticism of, they just took a bunch of old songs and reworked them. It's only half the songs. And I do think they do a good job. If you listen to those old demos and old performances, they do a good job of modernizing it. So in summary, I think, this is probably one of the heaviest Van Halen albums, which I really like. Like Martin said, this is kind of what we waited for, and we got it. And I appreciated that. I love Eddie's guitar tone and the approach he takes with the guitar on the album. Sounds modern, but unmistakably Eddie at the same time. And Alex's drums are rock solid as always. Wolfgang puts in a great performance. If you have the vinyl version, which I know Tim showed, you get a little better instrument separation there, and you can really hear his bass a lot better. I was listening to that earlier. I have the vinyl too, and it sounds great. And then, yeah, Dave, like I said earlier, I think sometimes the make or break on this album is whether you're buying Dave. I never listened to Van Halen to sing along with Dave anyways. I think he's first and foremost a front man and a really good one, and not necessarily a great vocalist. But to me, it doesn't detract from the album. So when I look back at all the songs, I like the fast ones, like Out of Space, Chinatown, Bullet Head. I like the weird ones, Honey, Sweetie, Baby Doll. And I like the fast, weird ones, like As Is. And then there's a whole bunch of mid-tempo ones that are great, like She's the Woman, Big River, Beats Workin', Stay Frosty. And then there's just a couple that I think are okay or I don't care for. And Blood and Fire is really the only one that I could leave off the album. But overall, I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10.
Nice.
All right. Excellent. Holy crap. Well, did you say you quit your job to become a snowboard instructor?
Yes.
Well, I'll be damned. See, Joe, he's right on your tail. He's right on your tail. We'll see what the parish has to say. All right. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate an 8. There you go. This record's looking pretty good. Well, we want to welcome the Parish of Rock here, and we want to hear what the Parish of Rock has to say.
Thank you. Sorry,
go ahead. No, you're good. Go ahead and then give your rating out of 10.
I'd like to digress for a second and just talk through where I start with Van Halen, really, because it plays a part in my thinking of this album. So I started with Van Halen very much at the beginning, I guess. Back in '78, I was a punk. I was into new wave. I liked the Clash, Sex Pistols, Boomtown Rats, those sort of bands. And I had an older brother who was into what I thought at the time were old fogey bands like Supertramp and Genesis. And one day he went off to see a gig in London, came back, and the next morning when we're walking into school, he tells me that one of my punk bands had blown Black Sabbath off stage at Hammersmith Odeon. And that punk band, according to him, was Van Halen. So that weekend, I went the local record shop to buy this punk album by this new band called Van Halen. Looked at the sleeve and saw a song called Atomic Punk, so that was good, good sign. It had a Kinks cover, which if you're a Jam fan, another thumbs up. Took it home, and the album was nothing like I was expecting, although I fell in love with it. And I think that it had all the characteristics of what I liked about punk. The songs were short, sharp, frenetic, chaotic, and even more chaotic as years went by with the later albums. The guitar solos were succinct and kind of fitted in with the songs. I liked the fact that Dave Lee Roth's voice wasn't brilliant. That kind of fitted my punk attitude at the time. So me and my mates back at school, we kind of adopted Van Halen with a few other bands like AC/DC and Cheap Trick as almost like honorary punk bands. And that's my starting point with them. So when this album came out, the first song I heard was on the radio was Tattoo. And unlike the rest of you, I thought it was brilliant. It kind of was exactly what I wanted the album to be. I'd read in the press it was coming out, thought it would be a bit of a disaster, as you've all said, trying to rekindle old sort of, former glories. And the single I thought was really good. And the reason I liked it is because it had that kind of chaotic and sort of energetic feel that I liked about Van Halen, and also had the humor, which I also like about Van Halen. So it kind of drew me into the album, really. So when I got the album, it was everything I wanted. And I was actually interested that you guys were saying that a lot of the songs were written back in the 70s, because I didn't know that. But that would explain why I could feel that the link back to how I felt when I first heard Van Halen back in 78. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So the songs themselves, I'm not going to go through all the songs, but I'll just go through some highlights for me of the album with just a couple of phrases. So Tattoo, I've written down, I think it's chaotic but catchy. Chinatown is fast and furious. Bullethead, I might be the only person, but I'm sure he's singing Motorhead. I just don't think he wanted a rip from Lemmy's team, so he's called it Bullethead, but it sounds like he's singing Motorhead to me. Honey Baby Sweet Do. One of the other things I like about the album is the sleeve. And again, it kind of draws me back to being at school. 1978, doodling the Van Halen logo, writing in my school book in my college, which is why I had a go at trying to do their logo on the back. I don't think I'll bother trying anymore, but anyway. So that took me back. But one of the things I liked about, I noticed on here, is on the song, Honey Baby, what's it called? Honey Baby Sweet Do, he sings it really quickly. If you read the lyrics, there's no spacing at all in the lyrics. It's got that same pace of the lyrics as he sings it, which that amused me. I thought that was quite good. And then Stay Frosty, as everybody said, is like Ice Cream Man Part 2. And that's not a phrase that translates over here. Never heard of it before. So I thought I'd look up what it means. You probably all know what it means, but I didn't realize it's a military term. And it means keeping one cool under fire, staying alert, particularly in dangerous situations. So that might be why it appealed to you, Joe, when you were in hospital. So that's apparently what Stay Frosty means. So for me, I think it's a great album. I really liked it when it came out. I really enjoyed listening to it over the last few days to sort of remind myself of it. I've summarized it in 4 words: high energy, catchy, and classic. And I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Nice. Sweet.
Very nice.
Excellent.
Yeah.
8.5. Wow.
Yeah.
Things are looking good, boys. All right. All right. Thanks, Parrish. Appreciate it. Tim Darling, what's your thoughts on this one and your rating?
Just real quick, Kevin, is that a Rival Sun shirt you have on?
It is.
Awesome. Love those guys. Okay.
And Parrish, is that a Darkness shirt you have on?
Yeah, it's a co-headlining. Blackstone Cherry in the Darkness did a tour at the beginning of the year. One of the weirdest co-headlining I can think of. But I love both bands. Went and saw them. And the opening act was a band I'd never seen before, Danko Jones, who I thought was really good as well. So, yeah, excellent night it was. But yeah, really strange. I thought really strange pairing of acts, really. But yeah, good.
Love the darkness. Love it.
All
right.
Yeah.
I've got a Jimmy K, the metal voice shirt on. There we go.
Nothing. Shirt.
I've got a work shirt, a radio shirt on. So before I get into my rating of the album, I do want to go over this quick because this is the best opportunity. In case people don't know, I'm going to try to keep it really quick and then just basically say where all these songs came from. So Tattoo was based on an old demo from '77 called Down in Flames. That's where the genesis of that comes from. She's the Woman is all the way from 1976. There used to be a website. I can't remember what it was called. It was vanhalen.net or van-halen. Van Halen demos, whatever it was. You could download all of these early demos. And they had so many songs written that they used all the way through the first 5 albums. I mean, even a song like Hang 'Em High from Diver Down started life in '77 as a song called Last Night. Musically, it's exactly the same. And they would chop and take pieces and bridges and it's really neat, you know, when you hear all of that old stuff. So She's the Woman was essentially a song called Voodoo Queen, but the middle section of it was later used for Mean Street in the midsection where Dave goes, dance, baby, like that. So they had to take that out when they did this album, put it, I'm assuming, a newly written part in for She's the Woman, because that was the midsection of it, that Mean Street part. You and Your Blues is a new one. I really like this one. I'm going to get into why I like it in a bit. Chinatown, I think that's a new one. Blood and Fire was an old idea called Ripley. And if anybody's familiar with the soundtrack to the movie The Wildlife from '84, you'll hear part of it on there. I think Blood and Fire was a new one as well. Bullethead is definitely an old demo from way back in the club days, '77 or older. I think As Is another new one. Honey Baby Sweetie Doll is a new one. Trouble with Never, new one. Out of Space used to be called Let's Get Rockin' or Ain't No Stoppin'. I've heard both. Both lyrics appear in it. Stay Frosty is new. And Big River was originally called Big Trouble, which has nothing to do with the song Big Trouble from Eat 'Em and Smile. Totally different song. But it's Big Trouble. They sing Big River instead. And Beats Working, I've got an article from ultimateclassicrock.com, probably from when the album came out, and it's Wolfie talking about the songs. Beats Working is based on an older song, too, and I cannot remember. It's escaping me now what song it was. But one thing I didn't know until I looked it up is that I knew that in the year 2000, there was an aborted reunion with Michael Anthony and Dave, and 4 of the songs were demoed then, and they would be Blood and Fire, As Is, Honey Baby Sweetie Doll, and Trouble with Never. So that was an aborted reunion.
One of these songs, too, he played on the show with Charlie Sheen, didn't he?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it As Is?
What is it? Yeah. Wait, I'm blanking on the name of the show, but
2.5 Men, yeah, with Charlie Sheen.
2.5 Men.
I think it was As Is, but I could be wrong about that. Okay. So I'm going to come at this from a way different place, I think, than all of you, because I started getting into music, seriously listening into music with the Sammy era. I'm a huge Sammy fan. I like Montrose. I like the solo stuff. I like Chickenfoot. I like The Circle. The man could sing the telephone book, and I'd like it. So 5150, that was my Van Halen. Now, like all bands that I would get into, I would definitely go back. So I went back and I bought all the albums. I can probably tell you that I like probably a good half of Van Halen 3. You know, I'm a big fan of this band. And A Different Kind of Truth, very much like Clockwork Angels from Rush. Oddly enough, they both came out in 2012, both last albums by the respective bands. once after Neil Peart died and then Eddie died, I listened to these two albums. I'd listened to them a lot anyway. I listened to them even more because like this is it. This is it. This is all it is. You know, maybe someday we'll get some unreleased stuff. I hope that happens. But as far as what we've got, you know, we'll talk about that. Something else that's different about this too. You don't have Michael Anthony, so you're missing that. You're missing those background vocals that are so vital. You don't have. It's produced by John Shanks. You don't have. It's not Ted Templeman. It's not Don Landy, and it's not on Warner Brothers. They got off Warner Brothers in the early 2000s because they weren't doing anything. They put that Best of Both Worlds compilation out with Sammy with the 3 new songs, and that was sort of like a one-off deal. And they did not re-sign with Warner Brothers. And there's something about the fact that, because even that live album that they put out from Tokyo Dome in 2015, even that's on Warner. So this is the outlier that's on Interscope. And there's something weird about seeing a Van Halen album and not seeing the Warner Brothers logo on the back of it. Although now, when you see, and I'm going to rant here for a second, it says Warner Records, which to me just does not look correct, doesn't look correct, and doesn't sound correct. It should be Warner Brothers Records. But what do I think of it? Well, okay. So being sort of raised on Van Halen with the more commercial stuff, the more polished stuff of the Hagar era, but liking the early stuff. I absolutely love the early stuff, particularly Fair Warning. That's my favorite of the first 6. With Dave, yeah, it's got a lot to do with Dave. But what I find is interesting about this album is that you've got that sort of Hagar era production, but with Dave on vocals. Like, so this sounds very much like what a follow-up to 1984 might have sounded like in the late 80s or maybe the early 90s. It doesn't sound all that different to me than For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge or Balance. It doesn't sound like 5150 or OU812 so much, but the latter two and Van Halen 3. So I like the production on it. When Tattoo first came out, I don't know why I didn't like it. I really don't know why I didn't like it, but I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be awful. I mean, I'll buy it because I'm a fan and I kind of have to, but oh, this is awful. Dave's whole shtick, and that's what it is. It's a shtick. I think he's a really interesting guy, but he's a very strange man. I mean, he posts the most random things even to this very day. But it grew on me. Tattoo grew on me. I got to really, really like it. I was so into this, I actually talked to my program director way back when and said, look, I want to get a couple copies of this and give this away on my Saturday night show. I want to take requests. I want to do a whole hour of Van Halen, and I did. It was a lot of fun, and I gave away a couple copies of this CD. And I played this all the time on my own. So She's the Woman is good, but again, I'm always distracted by that midsection because I know how it went originally, but still a good song. I really like You and Your Blues. You and Your Blues, it's funny, You and Your Blues to me sounds the most like a Hagar era song. It's a little bit more, it's got more of a pop feel to it. Great harmonies in the chorus. I whoever's doing it, it sounds good. I like the way that Dave handles it. I like that kind of choppy riff, but I kind of get a Best of Both Worlds feel from You and Your Blues. Chinatown is really cool. It's got one of my favorite Dave lyrics, headless body in a topless bar. I think that's brilliant. Blood and Fire is weird. When I hear Blood and Fire, I get Diver Down vibes. I don't know why. Bullethead, I mean, that could have been off the first album. That's like Atomic Punk or On Fire. It's a fast, heavy one. As is brutally heavy. It's like Drop C or something. It's a really, really heavy tuning on it. Love Alex's drumming on it with the double bass. But yeah, talking about Dave's lyrics, we get to Honey Baby Sweetie Doll. That's a tongue twister. I've got Dave's autobiography, Crazy from the Heat, and I think it's a great book, but you got to be in the right mood to read it because he is all over the place. He'll start talking about one thing and then he's off talking about something else and he expects you to go along with him. And his lyrics are much like that, like from the late 90s onward, I think. Really even from, maybe not so much Little Ain't Enough, but '94 album, Your Filthy Little Mouth. That's when he started to get really obscure, not just with his music, but lyrically especially. And if you listen to Me, Wise Magic and Can't Get This Stuff No More, both of which I thought were pretty decent songs from the best of in '96, his lyrics they're like quasi philosophical, but they're delivered with the humor that you expect from Dave. It's just very, very strange. I do really like, if anybody hasn't heard it, I really like his '98 album just called DLR Band. I think that's, if anybody likes classic Van Halen, there it is, the one that John 5 plays on some of it. But back to the album, Honey Baby Sweetie Doll. I think that he uses that phrase in his book, but I could be wrong. I'm talking about like a fast talking record exec or something. The riff to that one is weird to me because it sounds like it barely keeps up with itself. Like it barely makes it back to the like only Eddie could do something like that and make it work. I like The Trouble with Never. It's The Trouble with Never and then Blood and Fire, especially in the verses, you're really hearing some sour notes from Dave, and it is distracting because he is mixed really, really loud, which I'm sure that was a condition of this album even coming out. I mean, think about it. Van Halen, one of the biggest bands in the world, and they had gone completely radio silent. There was no activity from that camp for years and years and years. I don't know what Eddie expected Michael Anthony to do, but just sit and twiddle his thumbs because nothing was happening. And I think Eddie was just waiting for Wolfie to turn 16 so he could take him on the road. I think it was his plan all along. I think he's a talented kid. But anyway, I think that from the beginning, I think they've always done Michael Anthony dirty. And if you've ever read Noel Monk's book, Run with the Devil, that opinion won't get any better. But I think Dave made a lot of demands, one of which was they were about to sign with Columbia. At the last minute, Dave says, no, sign with Interscope. Fine, we'll sign with Interscope. Out of Space, typical early Van Halen rockers. Stay Frosty is fun. I mean, I actually kind of like the lyrics to this one. Dave's obviously enjoying himself a lot. Big River is great. And I don't know, Beats Working is about the only one on the album, and maybe it's because it is the last song, but to me, I always think Big River should have been the wind-up. I think they should have reversed those two songs because, oh yeah, right, there's one more song in here. Big River seems more like an ending statement to me. But the fact that anybody that, was the criticism of them digging into old songs, I don't think we'd have this album to talk about if they didn't do that. I don't think that Eddie and Dave could have been in the studio and come up with 12, 13 new songs. So I think Wolfgang deserves a lot of credit for being the one that went through these demos and said, Dad, there's some good stuff here. You should make songs out of them. Yeah, the album debuted at number 2. It was kept off the top spot from Adele, who was unstoppable at that time. So it would have been nice. The same thing happened to Rush with Clockwork Angels in the States. Debuted at 2. It would have been cool if they'd have had a number 1 album, that late in the career. This album did go gold in Canada, which I think is only 40,000 nowadays. Used to be 50,000, and it's sad that it didn't go platinum in the States. You'd think with Van Halen it would, but that's just how much the record business changed. I mean, I guess if it sold over 400,000 copies, boy, I think that might be gold. Now, didn't they lower Didn't they lower it by a certain amount, Martin? Like
I think they did.
So
I definitely remember it happening in Canada, but I don't hear anybody.
I always thought the States and Canada were in tandem. Just Canada's sales is always 1/10 of the U.S. as far as to certify. And if that's the case, there's a lot of albums that retroactively could be certified gold, but that's another discussion.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good album. I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it. Like I said before, with Dave being Dave, I was all ready to just dismiss it, but it won me over. I like the way he sings on most of this album. Live's a different story, but they captured him very, very well in the studio. I'm glad this album exists to talk about, and I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it over the years. So much so, I'm going to give it a 9. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I really like this album.
Nice.
All right. Excellent.
Cool, that was wicked. Awesome.
Yeah, Tim. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, kids. Well, we've got a 10, a 7, a 10, a 7.5, an 8, an 8.5, and a 9. You guys whipped through that quickly. And I'm just going to go ahead and calculate. I'm just going to be neutral on this one. And we come up with an 8.6.
Okay.
So based on the findings of the panel, I'm going to say that this does come under the dark horse flag. I'm going to make a statement, and that's the official statement.
Let me just say one thing that's kind of funny about Van Halen that Pete and I talk about all the time. It's like, this is a band where it's really frustrating to try figure out what your favorite record is by the band. You start thinking about it and you start getting cranky about it because you think, it's this one or this one. And there's always something to complain about all of them. That's sort of the problem, right? You always find one or two songs to complain about. So it's like, we all love Van Halen. We all love the idea of Van Halen. We all love those Van Halen records, but there just seems to be little flaws in all of them that you're never quite sure. Should I do this one today? It's like, I guess it's Fair Warning, or I guess it's Women and Children First, or whatever, right? Or the debut. The debut seems to win the most, and to me, the debut is the most sober and corporate and well put together one from all of them. Tim, you called the Sammy Hagar stuff polished. I don't ever think it sounds polished. To me, they just sound as Who-like the entire way through, except for the debut. That's the only one.
Well, I'm thinking more production wise.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
especially
and all that.
The electronic drums and such.
But even when they play a mellow song or something like an up-tempo ballad or whatever, it's still got a bit of that Ragged Who quality to it, right?
Well, I don't think you can put any of the Van Halen songs to a grid. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think they'd speed up, or as David Lee Roth likes to say, everything speeds up after the guitar solo. That's how you know Alex is knocking on your hotel room door after the show.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to. Yeah. I've always stand by my opinion that Wolfgang is the MVP of this album.
Oh, absolutely.
Co-producer as Eddie. I mean, right. Eddie says he's sort of the co-producer.
I think his bass playing is out of this world. Because I have a friend who was we were Van Halen geeks back in the day in high school, and he's like, tattoos. I'm like, no, tattoo will grow on you. I go, but buy this album because and my friend's a phenomenal bass player. I'm like, Wolfgang is amazing on this. And
the beginning of Chinatown where he and Eddie, or that's almost like a Mr. Big.
So Michael Anthony's background vocals are missing, but I think it's more than made up for with Wolfgang's virtuosity.
And Eddie's background vocals are part of it. Eddie can carry a tune. I remember when I saw them, I think they did this a few tours, but I remember being really surprised. They were doing Why Can't This Be Love? Second verse, Sammy puts the mic over to Mike Anthony. He sings the first half, and then Eddie takes the second half. And I was like, it was just so cool. So yeah, Eddie's got something to do with that harmony sound too. It's just that Mikey had the high stuff. And the Parish, I'm wondering, have you ever seen the original the cover for the first Van Halen album?
I did have it, actually.
With the original logo. That's really
cool. Unfortunately, it got damaged when I had a flood at home. So I don't have it anymore. But yeah, I did actually. Well, I assume it's the original. I got the version in 78, so presumably it was the original.
Tim, I have a question about that website you brought up, because I had a bootleg copy of them playing at the Whiskey or the Starwood.
I've got a cassette of them playing at the Starwood in 77.
Eddie Van Halen rips off Ace Frehley's guitar solo from Kiss Alive on She. And I can't find it anywhere. Because I got rid of a lot of my vinyl. I can't find it anywhere online, but I know he did it. And I don't know if that's when Gene Simmons was checking him out or.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I was like, wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, they did do a few Kiss songs in concert, but yeah, no, I'll let you know. I forgot about that. You just reminded me. They had there's so many cool covers they used to do that I wish there were better versions of, like Man on the Silver Mountain, and the funniest one is Make It Last by Montrose. You've literally got David Lee Roth singing a Sammy Hagar song, but it's not a very good recording.
I've got the whole list in my Van Halen book here somewhere. I've got the entire list listed off, but hang on, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Make It Last. The funny thing is, Make It Last, I believe, is the only one they ever cover, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprised they didn't do Rock Candy. I could hear Eddie doing something.
I could hear that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Wolfie is the MVP. And again, I don't think this album would have existed without him.
No.
Like basically saying, come on, dad, you know, let's, you know, you don't like Sammy now. So get Dave, you know, get somebody, do something, right? Do something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing about Van Halen. It's not as bad as like a band like Boston, but I just wish seems like there's wasted years where there could have been more albums, you know, and supposedly there's albums worth with both vocalists. So you know, bring it on. Let's have it. And hopefully someday I would rather it not come out as like a $1,000 or $1,500 box set with, you know, hundreds of songs on it. Give us an album. Give us a new Van Halen album every 2-3 years. That'd be great.
Yeah.
It may happen. Wolfie, well, there's a lot to go through.
Here's a couple of the highlights from the songs they covered. So Aerosmith, Last Child, Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, Black Sabbath, Tomorrow's Dream was here. Budgie in for the Kill they covered. Rick Derringer, Still Alive and Well. What else we got here? Kiss All the Way, Firehouse, and Rock and Roll All Night. Zeppelin, Hot On for Nowhere, The Rover, Trampled Underfoot. We got Queen, Now I'm Here. Robin Trower, The Fool in Me. So yeah, ZZ Top, Brown Sugar, Chevrolet, Francine, LaGrange, Tush, and Waiting for the Bus.
A lot of ZZ Top. Wow.
A lot of ZZ Top.
Yeah. But that's, you know, that Billy Gibbons style delivery isn't that different than Dave when you think about it, because there's a lot of humor there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in Dave's range, you know.
That too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, kids. Anything else to add before we wrap this one up?
I don't think so. That was pretty good analysis.
Excellent. You guys are all over it. All right. So we give this one an 8.6. So we do certify this as a dark horse record. I want to thank the panel for coming on tonight. Nice to see the Parish of Rock. This is his debut.
Thank you.
And we'll hope to see you back.
I hope to be
what's
back.
Next, kids? I don't know. There's more in the pipeline. So stay tuned. So please like, subscribe, check out the Patreon, Ko-fi. It's all there, children. Oh, yeah. TeePublic. Don't forget, that's below. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.